Hey guys, welcome back to the third installment of my series on mixing vocals. Welcome back to my three-part series on mixing vocals. This is the third installment, the third and final installment, and I can't wait to dive in. We're going to be focusing on background vocals today. We've covered compression, EQ, reverb, delay, panning. All of these things we're going to be using in a lot of the same ways on background vocals. There's a few little differences because we'll be working with groups of vocals instead of just one lead vocal, but for the most part, the concepts and principles are the same. So we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to show you how to get that plush, world-class, commercial level background vocal sound. Also, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us continue to produce these videos for you. And if you haven't noticed, with each video, we're getting a little bit more high-tech each time. Now we got a light so that you can see all of my sexiness live and in color. All right, so we're gonna dive in. Let's get ready. Okay, so the last place we left off, we were working on a different song. We were working on Billy Crawford's song, Work in Progress. For this song, I'm using a different song. What I've done is I've recorded some background vocals myself, just some raw background vocals that haven't been treated in any kind of way, to a new song so that you could see all the way from just something raw all the way up to backgrounds that sound like they belong on an album. So before we dive in, there's just a few things I want to do as far as setting up the session so that you see what I see. You might already be set up this way, but if not, there's a couple things you need to do to get the advanced settings set up so that you have all the right tools. So the first thing you want to do, you want to go to Logic, Preferences, General, and go over to Advanced and make sure every one of these checkboxes are checked. And enable all, you can just hit enable all and it'll be done. And then what that should do is make sure that you have all the advanced tools. So like if you're only seeing one tool here instead of two, then you probably don't have all of them checked. If you don't have access to your flex mode, you probably don't have all of them checked. So go ahead and check them all because we will be covering some editing things. Having access to these tools is going to be necessary. If you've done that, let's just jump right in. So I'm going to play a piece of this song here, this demo.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers. I guess life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we make it, but life changes.
There you have it. So I just basically recorded myself 3 times singing this hook. Now, why 3? What I like to do when I'm working with background vocals, especially if I plan to layer them, is I like to record them in odd numbers. So either 3, 5, 7, depending upon how big you want to go, I use odd numbers. And the reason why I use odd numbers is because of what I plan to do with the panning. So usually I like to have one vocal in the center, and then I like to take the extra vocals and start panning them out. So in this case, we've got 2 extra vocals here. I like to take these 2 extra tracks and pan them. So I would pan one left. So this is my center, and we'll just go ahead and label it C so that we're all on the same page. And then this one would be my right, and then this one would be my left. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go ahead and pan these to their respective locations. So the right one, we're going to take and we're going to pan it all the way to the right. We're going to take the left one, we're going to pan it all the way to the left. Remember, our pan knob is here, and whatever track we're selected on, the information over here is corresponding to that track. Okay, so center, right, and left. That's the first thing I'm going to do. What this does is it spreads out the vocals throughout the stereo field so that way, instead of everything just sitting on top of each other, it creates a nice, plush, spacious performance. So let's take a listen.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers.
So already, just because the vocals are not sitting on top of each other and now the vocals have their own space, there's already a clean thing that's happening. It's already kind of cleaning out some of the clutter. It's giving our brains the opportunity to hear things all in their own separate spaces. When they were on top of each other, it just kind of sounds like a bunch of people talking on top of each other, right? Then you spread it out a bit, and now our brains can process that information a little cleaner. Now, you don't have to go all the way to the right or all the way to the left, but I just like to start there, and then if I don't want them so spread, I can start to pull back later. But this is a good starting point. So the next thing we want to do after panning these three vocals, how we've got them panned, is we want to group them so that when we start adding effects, rather than having to add effects to all three vocals separately, we can add effects to one track that will affect all three vocals simultaneously. So this is how we do that. We're going to click on our center, the first track. We're going to hold down Shift. We're going to click on the last track, which is our left. It'll select all three because we've held down Shift. Then we're going to hit Control, click, which usually is the right click, and it should open up this new tab. When it opens up this new tab, we're going to select Create Track Stack. We're going to select Summing. If it's not on Summing, if it's on Folder, just click on Summing and hit Create. Now what Summing does is it puts all three of these tracks inside of a folder that we can open and close by clicking this tab, this little arrow tab. It also buses these tracks. And what I mean by buses is it sends the output of all three of these tracks to another output that is now its own track. So now if I close this, and I just label this, we'll just label this BAX, BKS1. We'll call it BAX1. And if I look over here, I now have a BAX1 track that has its own inserts, own EQ, own pan. And now if I hit play,
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and
all three of those tracks are now being sent to this one track. And I have a volume control, so I can turn down the volume of all three of these summed tracks. I can turn it down here.
I guess life changes.
Right?
I woke up this morning.
It's just an efficient way to work with grouped vocals, especially when we start adding effects. So far, we've panned our vocals, and we can always open this up, and we can still do individual balancing and processing per track. But right now, we're going to focus on the group as a whole. So we've got our center, we've got our right, we've got our left. We're going to close that up. Now all of those are being sent to a bus track called BAX. And now we're going to work on this bus track, and we're going to apply some of those same effects that we did on the lead vocals, but slightly different for backgrounds. But instead of doing it on the separate tracks, we're going to do it right here on our bus track, on our backgrounds track. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on EQ. A good practice would be to go ahead and try to loop these background sections a little bit, and even solo this for now.
I guess life changes.
So we're just hearing, so you have your mute and solo here. We solo this, and now we're hearing all three of these backgrounds minus the music. And we can then kind of dig in and carve out what we need to do. So let's listen.
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers.
So I'm going to move kind of fast here because we've covered a lot of this in episodes 1 and 2. So I'm just going to kind of jump through, and I'll talk through it fast. But I'm going to do pretty much what we've done for the lead vocals in episodes 1 and 2. If you need a little bit more detail, go back and watch episode 1 and 2, and I really dive into EQ and all the different settings. But first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to start at 180.
I guess life changes.
Cool. I'm going to go to my boxy frequency here right around 500. I'm going to bring it down around -2. Let's listen.
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers are new strangers.
Cool, I'm going to put it away. We're going to jump into the next thing, which is going to be compression, dynamics, compressor, stereo. We're going to choose platinum digital, and we will hit play, and we'll go ahead and turn off the auto gain for now. We're going to set this to 4:1, and we're going to set our attack early, our release later, and we're going to hit play here.
I guess life changes.
We're looking at the -10. We don't want to go past that.
I woke up this morning and oh lovers are new strangers.
We're already pretty much in the ballpark of where I'd like to be.
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers are new strangers.
Let's hear what happens over here.
I guess life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we make it, but life changes.
Just here.
Guess life changes.
We're right at the 10. I'm just going to pull it back just to be safe.
Guess life changes.
There we go. Now we'll go ahead and keep it moving. Now the next thing we want to do is reintroduce some makeup gain. So we lowered the ceiling. Now we're going to raise the floor a bit. Let's listen. We're going to listen with the music.
I guess life changes.
Push just a little bit.
I woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers.
Sounds pretty good. Also a nice little tip here when you're dealing with the makeup gain is you should be able to turn off and on your compressor, and you shouldn't hear much of a volume change. If it's getting drastically louder, then you're probably overusing the makeup gain. And if it's still really, really low, you're probably underusing the makeup gain. Don't stress about this too much. Just get generally in the ballpark. Let's listen.
I guess life changes.
Turn it off.
Woke up this morning and old lovers.
Turn it on.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers.
So we're still in the ballpark, which is great, but we've now just kind of leveled off some of those peaks, raised some of the valleys, and we're doing it on a group track, which is really nice instead of us applying it to each of these individual tracks. And so we can keep it moving. We'll close this up for now. We've got EQ, we've got compression. We're going to do a little flavor EQ, EQ, vintage EQ collection, down to vintage tube EQ, stereo. We are then going to push our drive to 6. We're going to set our frequency to 12, the air frequency, and we're going to boost to around 5.5 to 6. Let's take a listen.
I guess life changes.
Go to 6.
I woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers.
Let's turn it off. Let's listen.
I guess life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we make it, but
Hear how those vocals get nice and crisp on the top end? It's almost like if you have a photo that's a little out of focus and then you hit the sharpen button, and then once you hit it, the edges get nice and crisp. That's what we've done. We've just created a nice little crisp edge there. And because we've done that, we want to be careful of our S's. So guess what's next? The de-esser. We're going to run over to waves real quick. We're going to grab our trusty de-esser stereo. Keep in mind that all the effects that I'm adding to this channel are stereo effects, and the reason why is because we're working on a stereo channel. Now, when we start panning stuff to the left and to the right, what that means is something different is happening in the left speaker than what is happening in the right speaker. And so in order for that to be picked up correctly in headphones and in speakers and things like that, you need to be working on a stereo track. Now, if you're working with a mono track, what that means is whatever's happening in the left speaker is exactly what's happening in the right speaker. So for instance, a lead vocal that's coming down the center, that's all that's happening. That can be a mono track. But when we start dealing with backgrounds and we're panning stuff left and right, that means different things are happening in the left speaker than what are happening in the right speaker. And in order for that information to be translated well, we need to be working with a stereo track. So when we bust these over to a stereo track, now we need to be working with stereo effects. If we put mono effects on these channels, what'll happen is it'll reverse that. It'll take us back to things sounding mono. So just make sure you're using stereo effects on a stereo track, and everything will stay sounding separated and divided between the speakers the way you want to divide them. Okay, so now we've got our de-esser. We're going to set it to wide. We're going to choose male S, and we're going to have a listen.
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers.
So Strangers is a good one, so I'm going to just take off my loop real quick, go to around bar 19. Let's listen.
Strangers. Strangers.
Good, we're right at -6. Things still sound natural, and we'll turn it off and on and see if what kind of impact we're having.
I guess life changes. I woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers. Strangers.
Yeah, a little bit more controlled, still natural sounding, but definitely not annoying. Great, so we're good with our foundation. We're gonna move on to some reverb, some delay, and just get a vibe going. So I'm gonna just grab a empty bus here. Remember how to use your sends. Click on sends, bus. We're gonna grab an empty bus. Let's start at 10, and really doesn't matter what bus you choose at this stage. Just choose one, and then we're gonna go down to reverb, space designer, stereo, and we're gonna go to our medium spaces. This just helps us kind of preset the length of the reverb. So the length of the reverb is gonna be medium. We're gonna go plate, soft plate. You don't have to choose soft plate, choose whatever you want, but this is a good starting point for me. Now what I wanna do is go ahead and send that track, that bass track, over to that as much as I can so I can really hear what the reverb's doing.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and all of us.
Okay, first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna set our pre-delay so that we've got a little bit of dry signal coming through and set it to 1/32.
I guess life changes.
So there's a little delayed response to the dry signal versus the wet signal. We've got that set pretty good. Let's move on to EQ. We're gonna use our high pass filter out a lot of that low end information. It's just gonna create some mud. We'll use our low pass filter and curve off some of the top end so we get a nice round sound. Let's listen.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and all of us are new strangers.
Let's listen without them filtered.
I guess life changes. The pictures are faded.
Yeah, so now we're just getting a nice warm reverb sound, and we can go ahead and close this reverb for now, and we'll go ahead and bring the send down to a reasonable level. Let's listen.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and all of us are new strangers. I guess life changes.
Great, so now I've kind of found that spot where I can barely hear the reverb, and now I just want to check and make sure it's doing what I want it to do by just turning it off and on with the power button here as I listen.
I guess life changes.
Off.
Woke up this morning and all of us are new strangers.
So it's just creating a nice little pad under the vocal that gives it a nice little bit of warmth and a nice little bit of space, which is nice. And I'm gonna turn it up a little bit more, see what we get.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and all of us are new strangers.
I like that. Actually, what I wanna do to it is I just wanna round off the top a little bit more. So let's round off top a little bit more.
I guess life changes.
Yeah, I was feeling like I was getting a little bit of a bathroomy kind of sound, and so I wanted to get my singer not sounding like he's singing in the shower just a little bit more, and I pulled back a little bit, and now it's nice and warm and sitting right where I want it to sit. And let's do one more thing. Let's go ahead and grab our trusty delays. So we're gonna go bus up to bus 11, and we're gonna choose delay, echo. All right, we're gonna set this thing. This is at a slower tempo, 75, so I'm probably gonna be safe with setting this at a fourth note. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the delay to fall in the spaces. Let's listen.
I guess life changes.
Oh, actually, I gotta send some signal over first. Let's do that.
I guess life changes. Life changes. Woke up this morning, all a new strangers.
All right. So the feedback is obviously annoying the crap out of us. So what we want to do is we want to turn it down. Turn it down to 0. That means it'll feedback just once. We'll leave our color set down the middle. And if it's not set down the middle, you can hold Alt and click and it'll snap it to the middle for you. And what we'll do is we'll add our own color on this channel with our EQ. So let's leave that where it is for now. Let's leave it nice and loud because we're gonna do a little bit more processing on it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump over to our EQ and we are going to select one of these presets because what we're looking for here is not something technical, we're looking for something creative. So what we're gonna do is just go down, let's go down to EQ tools and let's see if we can get like this one right here. It says phone filter notch. So that's gonna create a high pass filter all the way up pretty extreme, and then a low pass filter that's also pretty extreme, and then it's boosted with a high resonance curve, some of the mids. So let's take a look at what that sounds like. Let's hear it.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers, a new strength.
So you can hear they've got a little vibe now, right? They sound like they're coming through a telephone, an old telephone or an old speaker or something like that. And what I'm gonna do is I like that effect. I'm just gonna explore getting a little less of it, maybe turning down some of these mid-range things and widening it a bit. Let's just see.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers, a new strangers.
Cool, so it's giving me a vibe. Now what I'm gonna do is I'll just turn it down a bit. We'll leave it up the middle. We won't pan it left or right because we've already kind of got vocals, the vocals that are being sent there are kind of already panned. So we're just gonna turn it down, and it's just gonna keep things sitting well within the stereo field, but giving it a little bit of color and vibe. So we'll turn it down.
I guess life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers, a new strangers.
Cool, that's kind of sitting somewhere comfortable for now. I just turned it down a little bit more. It's cool, it's got a nice little vibe. Now, so we've gotten back to where we last left off after episodes 1 and 2. We've added our EQ, our compressor, our tube EQ, some de-essing, some reverb, and some delay to get a vibe. And as you can see, just with those few things and some panning, we're already starting to get something that sounds pretty commercially viable. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to clean up. Now, this is very important. And actually, you could do this before any of the mixing. But it's kind of nice to kind of get your pre-mixing set up and then start doing some of this editing, because you start to really hear and feel what it's going to sound like as a finished product when you start making little changes. So now what we're going to dive into is some editing things we can do to just make these vocals even a little tighter. So let me zoom in real quick. You'll notice I've opened up our track stack here. It was closed. I've just opened it up. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And now that I'm zoomed in, I'm going to do some minor editing and some minor tweaking that's going to help these vocals just have that last little bit of polish that they need. So the first thing that I noticed is when I start at the top of this phrase,
I guess life changed.
there's only one vocal, and that vocal's coming out of the right ear that says, I guess. Right? And so one of the things with background vocals to keep them from getting messy is you want them to be as close to each other as they can be. So if the singer said one thing in one track that he didn't say in the others, it's probably best to just cut that one thing out, or just to have the singer re-record. But if they're not there, then we can just kind of cut some things out. So we're going to cut this I guess out that's happening on the right channel. We're going to deal with this. Get it out of there. We don't need it. Let's listen.
Life changes.
Now, the way I'm able to do that is my secondary tool is set on the marquee. So if you click on the secondary tool and you go down to marquee, you can select marquee. Now, what's great about marquee is when I hit the Apple key allows me to access my secondary tool by holding it down. So I hold down the Apple key, and now I can click on a section and let go of the Apple key, which brings me back to my arrow. And now if I just click, it's going to cut it. And then I can hit the delete and it'll delete it. Also, we're going to talk about the fade tool here. This fade tool, which you probably don't have showing up when you go to the top corner of your session, the way you get that tool to show up is you can go File, Preferences, General, Editing. Make sure you select the Editing tab. And when you select the Editing tab, you can click Fade Tool, Click Zones. When you select that, what that does is now when you're in one of these zones, the fade tool will show up. So if you go to the top left-hand corner of that particular waveform, your fade tool will now show up. So this is going to come in handy for quick editing. So now I can select all three of these, get my fade tool, and just pull it, right? And my fade tool popped up just by moving to the top left-hand corner of that particular region. Now let's listen.
Life changes.
Yeah, and we can do the same thing here. Let's click and listen.
I guess life changes.
So now I've got two tracks saying I guess and one not saying I guess. So we'll just go ahead and to even it out, we'll just go ahead and get rid of this I guess. All right, click, Move it out of the way.
Guess life change.
Guess. Zoom in a little bit more. Hold Apple. I can drag, get to the spot that I want to get to. Release Apple. I can click my left mouse click. Now it's divided or separated these from everything else. I can highlight them and delete them. Okay? And just for uniformity, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of this too. And now I can fade these. And what I should get is a nice entrance.
Life changes.
Yes, very nice. All right, those little details matter, right? They keep things nice and clean. And then if you have a lead vocal that's singing on top of those things, the backgrounds aren't distracting from the lead vocal because they're popping out in random places. So we got a nice clean thing now.
Life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we'd make it, but life changes.
Great. So now we've tightened that up a little bit. One more thing we can do is we can tighten up the pitch. Just get it a little cleaner, and get everything a little closer to each other. Now this would be a good time to know the key of your song. So in my case, the key of my song is E major. So I'm going to show you a new tool and a new function that I really love when working with background vocals in Logic that I think is just a great way to quickly get a good sound without adding a whole lot of processor-intensive workload on your computer. So what we can do is we can highlight all these. We can go to Functions, Selection-Based Processing. This is going to bring up a new window. And inside this window, we have an Insert window. And we can click on our Insert window, and let's go down to Pitch, Pitch Correction, Mono. We're selecting mono, not stereo, because we're going to be working on these tracks individually, which are mono tracks. If we were applying this pitch correct over here to our stereo track, our bus, then we would use stereo. But in this case, we're going to use mono. We're going to set, in my case, this is E major. So we're going to select E major. What I'm going to do is go ahead and lower this response time down to 80 or 70, somewhere in that ballpark. That's just going to make, what this pitch correction is going to do is try to keep my pitch within the scale of the song, and depending upon how far I bring this down, it's going to be more or less aggressive, right? And if you have Antares or any other pitch, waves pitch, this all works the same way. You can also bring it into the selection-based processing, set your settings. Once you have your settings set, you can preview here.
Life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers, I knew strangers.
Great, so it's not perfect, but it's definitely controlling the pitch a little bit more, and that's exactly what I want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and hit Apply. So you can see it's applied this pitch correction to these tracks. It hasn't created inserts, it actually just printed this pitch correct onto these tracks. So we're not using any additional processing power. And now we can just listen to this, and it's either working or it's not. If it's not, we can undo and change the settings. Let's listen.
Life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers, I knew strangers. Life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we'd make it, but life changes.
There you go. So we're starting to get something that sounds a little tighter, and imperfections in background vocals are okay. It actually creates texture, and so they don't have to be perfect, but what you want them to be is not distractingly wrong, right? So if the pitch is too far out of place, it'll just sound wrong. But if you can get the pitch a little closer to each other, what it does is just sound tighter and cleaner and neater. So taking that extra time to just get it as clean as you possibly can before you copy it just means that a larger portion of the song is going to be cleaner. Choruses make up at least 40%, if not more, of a song. So by getting those choruses tight, you're getting 40% of your song really tight. And you can do that really quickly here, and then you can copy it and place it throughout the song. So let's take a listen real quick.
Life changes. I woke up this morning and oh lovers, I knew strangers.
So now I'm just balancing it while I'm listening to it, bringing the fader down.
Life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we'd make it, but life changes.
All right, one more time. Let's take a listen.
Changes. Life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers. Life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we make it, but life changes.
Let's hear where we started. Get rid of all of these effects. Bring these all back to the center, like so. Let's take a listen now.
Life changes. Woke up this morning and old lovers are new strangers. Life changes. The pictures are faded. I thought that we make it, but life changes.
So pretty much what we've done is just reviewed all the principles that we covered, with the new exception of working with a little bit of pitch correction to get them all to kind of meld together better. Also panning them across the stereo spectrum so that we get a nice wide sound and each vocal has its own place. Also bussing them through using track stack. So by using a track stack, we're able to send them all to one fader where we can process groups of vocals on one fader. So it's a great efficient way to work. And we've used 99% of the Logic stock plugins that come with Logic, and we're already getting a great sound. So you can imagine how much better the sound gets when you're using better plugins. But what's most important is that you should be able to get a pro sound with the stuff that comes with Logic. There's a lot of great tools. So don't sleep on the tools. They're very, very helpful. They're very, very powerful. And really it's about diving in and practicing some of these concepts. It's really, really important that you practice the tools that we've talked about and that you don't rely on expensive plugins. You have the rest of your life to explore all the new plugins and all the new technology, but you want to focus on the fundamentals first. And if you can get the fundamentals right, all that other stuff is just icing on the cake. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully it was helpful to you. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll post that information as well. For Billy's album, I'll be sure to post the link below so that you can check out that album. I wrote and produced almost every song on the album, as well as mixed those songs, and the whole album was done in a bedroom. So if you're wondering what the potential is for a product that is recorded in a bedroom, take a listen to his album and you'll see it's not about the gear. It's not about anything other than the ears and the knowledge. And I'm trying to share that with you as best as I can now. So please take a listen to the album, the links below, and support the channel and let me know what you'd like to see next. Thank you so much. My name is Marcus Davis. Until next time.